Hello.
Hi.
And welcome to another edition of Storyworld Explorers, where we're exploring the story world of the Modern Rosie.
So Modern Rosie is a photography project by Chris Guillen, in which he is taking pictures and portraits of influential women in his life and people that have been recommended to him in the same light as Rosie the Riveter, and showing that, yes, women can do it too.
Yes, and this is all about, highlighting and showcasing ambitious women who are experts in their field and are very influential to both Chris Guillen and also and should be influential to everybody else watching or seeing these videos.
Right, and for whatever reason, a lot of women have to feel as though they're fighting through to be experts in their fields. And as anybody who knows us knows, our mother is a matriarch. She has been in charge for our family and the breadwinner for as far back as we can remember. So this story world really did hit home for us, and we got to explore different ways of how to kind of dismantle this system of, if you're a woman, you can't be an expert, or you're not treated the same as a man being an expert in that field or whatever field it might be. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it's coming right up, or if you want to listen to it, you can find it on all podcast platforms. Enjoy
the show.
Okay, well, great. Well, we are here with Chris Guillen, and we're talking about his story world photography project, Modern Rosie. Chris, it's so great to have you on. We have to really give a big shout out to a good friend of ours, friend of the podcast, Marcel Krovchek, who introduced us and said that, hey, well, I got this guy named Chris. He's trying to do some stuff with this project that he has, and the first person I thought to send him to was you. And so we had a conversation, ended up going for an hour. Hopefully this podcast episode, we're going to have to probably put the brakes on it at some point, talking about it, because it's something that's pretty near and dear to our own hearts.
Right.
Having our own Modern Rosie, who we've lived with for or have known our entire lives. So Chris, why don't you jump in? Tell us a little bit about Modern Rosie, about the project.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. It's actually an honor to talk about it. It's been something that's brewing for 5 years. It started in 2018. I went to a seminar with a photographer who told me that I need to start doing more personal projects. I mean, when you're self-employed, you often put your personal projects on the side, thinking you always have to make money. Mm-hmm. And this photographer, who is probably 10 years older than me, somewhere in there, he's been doing amazing work for a long time, always seems passionate about everything he does, and you can tell about everything in his website that you know who he is. And he said, nobody knows who you are. They know that you can take a good picture, but without personal projects, you really don't know what you're about. And so I got super excited when I left this 3-day seminar. My mind was spinning, like, wow, what can I do? And I did it. I started a project that I'd been thinking about the 10 fathers, the 10 men in my life that have really helped groom me to be the dad that I am. But then this other one came along, and we'll get back to that later. This woman posted, who owns a brewery in Forest Park. So I'm based out of Forest Park. I had a storefront for 10 years. And I saw a post that she made on Instagram. Simple thing, right? Like everybody sees it. I think it might have even been a story. It might have been the beginning of story days. And I was like, I didn't even know it was a story, but I was looking at it going, and all she had was 2 long rubber gloves. She opened the brewery like a year or 2 before, and all she ever does is work. She had overalls on, and I didn't even see her face. Like her face was cut off like this. Like all you saw was like this, right? And she's like, working again another Monday, and immediately, and I don't think there was any bandana on. I think it was just the overalls, bare shoulders, tank top, and I'm like, there's a Rosie. We should be talking Modern Rosies, right? And so immediately I get home, and I'm like, I gotta text her. And so I Facebook Messenger, because she's all into that. And I said, do you want to do it? She's like, I'm in. And she hates having her picture taken. She's like, she's all subconscious. She's all self-conscious, not self-conscious about having her picture taken. But then she was so into this idea. And I said, okay, well, look at Rosie, look at the original, and I want you to kind of interpret it yourself. Anyway, so I took her in her place. I mean, I'm like, we'll have her sit on the bar. She really took it to the nines. She thought ripped, overalls, but she really went with a full bandana, She went makeup, like I haven't seen her in makeup, and you may not want to put that in, but she put a lot more makeup on. She really went into the character.
Right.
And she really did a great job. I took her in the back and we picked up a full keg. She threw it up on her shoulder like nothing. I'm just kidding. It was not full. And we
No.
Yeah, for the character, it was full.
It was full.
Yeah,
Full
it was
keg.
full. So half full. Let's just say that, right? She's badass. So she throws it up on her shoulder, and there it is, right? Like, and then we took her on the street. I actually did several. We took out a wooden barrel and put it and stood her on the street, holding it way up over her head. So I've got several iterations, right? And I was also I also had done a lot of photographs. I photographed a lot of people on the street because like we're going places, like it's kind of a metaphor of going places. So I was trying to get every Rosie in the street I was really pushing it a lot of levels in the first several shoots, right? So we get it done, but I didn't finish it for several months. I didn't finish that picture for several months. I was really thinking about what it is. And then I took a picture of Rosie the author. She's a friend of mine who does YA novels. It's a woman who is also part of Rape Victim Advocates. She's hugely into that organization. She's like on the board there. And I know she really has a big, strong heart for the young women of the world. And I thought, what a beautiful person she is. And then I captured Connie Brown, who owns Brown Cow Ice Cream. So the last woman's name is Krista Desir. I'm sorry, I totally blew that. Rosie the author is Krista Desir. She's a novelist. I've seen her books in as far as Portland. I've seen her books there. So she's published. She really knows her stuff, but now I think she just concentrates on publishing. But she does care about the plight of young women, and that really meant a lot to me. So anyway, then I did Connie Brown, who's an ice cream shop owner in Forest Park, and Connie Brown Ice Cream, Brown Cow Ice Cream. Connie is more than just an ice cream person, an ice cream shop owner. She connects all the communities around here. Everybody loves going to Brown Cow. Kids go there. All the high schoolers go to Brown Cow. And that's, not just high schoolers, middle schoolers go to Brown Cow. They walk to Brown Cow. And they've all grown up going to Brown Cow. It's a community place, right?
Yeah.
So Connie is just this amazing force in Forest Park.
Well, I think what's a clarifying point too, just in case anybody's listening doesn't know who Rosie is Rosie the Riveter, which was part of the it's part of the recruitment process of getting women into the workplace during World War II, when male services were in low supply because they were across the Atlantic Ocean fighting Nazis and bad people. And so I think what we should really do, and all those are great examples of these people, these women that exhibit the same types of, or essentially what that poster was meant to do, right?
Yeah.
The women out there that are going above and beyond, that are making and forging their own path in many different industries, and and empowering women and putting them in places of empowerment. Like when you're saying that I like to put them out on the street, it's like it's not just and it's not just like, oh, let's put it in the studio. It's like, no, these people are out there, they're working, and they're powerful, and it needs to be translated in the image. Like, these people are there. And so I think what we kind of want to know more about is like, why is this so important to you, and why are you the perfect artist to capture these things? Right.
Okay, so thank you. That's awesome. And I should have introduced that 81 years ago, or around roughly 1942, was set up as a propaganda machine by the government to recruit, actually originally lower class women to go into the workforce. By 1943, they realized they didn't have enough, so then they hired Norman Rockwell. I have these images for you so that they hired Norman Rockwell to create one for the Saturday Evening Post. That got a lot more middle-class women out to really make the workforce a bigger place. So that got the women out of the home from being homemakers and being more productive economically for the United States, right? And women felt empowered. And when the men came back, the women were sent back home, but they already had this feeling of we can do things outside the home.
Right.
So that's what I love about the character. And I didn't know that I loved the character this much until like, 2 or 3 in. I'm like, man, and I read more about it, and I kept reading more about her. And, there's a Rosie the Riveter museum in San Francisco. So I'm like, man, how can I work with them? I really, so going back to how your question, how did I get involved? I mean, why is it important to me? And like, so the first year I taken 4 of them, and I was wondering, why is this important coming from a man? I started wondering, why should this story come from me? I was feeling guilty that a woman probably should carry this story, right? But women do. Like, you see women, they get the tattoo. I've seen them all over the place. You can't, you can look up that hashtag, and there's women using that. They're all using it, right?
Right.
I grew up I was born into a family with 4 older sisters, and a mother who had been stepped on kind of career-wise her entire existence. She was a homemaker, and all she wanted to do was be a homemaker. But because of what the men had done to her, she had to work. And she had to raise her children at the same time. She had to do both. And then I watched my sisters all struggle trying to get jobs. They wanted to get 45 words a minute as a typewriter on the typewriter. They took classes so that they could be the best typist in their class, and hopefully their goals were one day to be the executive assistant to a president of a company.
Right.
Like, that was their dream, was to actually be the purveyor of the man's word. Right.
Yeah.
But the men often stepped on them. Like, my sisters couldn't. They were not. I love them dearly, but they had trouble spelling. They would admit this, right? Like, they would say, "I'm really not great at." So they wouldn't be able to be an executive assistant in the same way. But they were always trying to make the man's word around them better. I also have a sister who was the rebel, who always said, who was always saying things like, "Why can't I do it? Why can't I do that job?" Right? She'd work at the Board of Trade, which is like a big locker room, right? She worked down there all the time, and she had a job as a trade checker. She was one of the, I don't know if she was one of the first trade checkers. She was one of the only trade checkers as a female down there. And this is 70s, 80s. Man, it's a big locker room, and she was always like, if there was a promotion in line, she would be like, why not me? Why is my voice not matter?
Yeah.
So, when my dad was no longer part of the picture and my mom had to work, I just saw all the struggles. And I've always I've been like my sister, why doesn't their voice matter? Yeah, I was always questioning that too. And why can't they do that? Like, they can do more than but because they're like, society kind of oppresses their words often. They don't, from the beginning, they don't think that there's worth. They lose some value in who they are, and they don't feel like they can even try for a job that is traditionally men, right? So I've just watched that evolution throughout my life, and I think that that's why it speaks to me more. And I think it's awesome that a guy is saying this story. Now that I've gotten to this point, I'm 5 years in, I'm even stronger behind it. Here I am, a man saying this, and I feel like I need to be more proud of these images and get them out in front of people, so that to prove that women have a voice, they are strong and economic drivers for the world around us, and they have a lot of autonomy. Those are all just, that's where it is. I'm super proud of it, and I honestly, for a long time, was holding it really close to me, so that so I can make this something really special, and then finally get it there. And now I'm like, no, I should get it out there and inspire people to think about and to be more proud of the women around them. When I told you the story, you were like, my mom, and you were so excited. Tell me a little bit about your mom again. Like, I just love hearing that story. It's beautiful. So
yeah. I want to touch on something first. We can talk about our mom, and then I joked with Chris that, of course, this will be the one podcast Mom actually listens to.
Oh yeah.
She doesn't listen to any of our podcasts. Come on, Mom. But there was a part that I wanted to touch on with a man telling the story, taking these pictures as in yourself, and how it's important that there's a man doing it, because very often we don't, or what really needs for change, right, is for the patriarchal system to actually change. And in order to do that, you need, quote unquote allies to change that conversation, have that conversation. Because I remember when we were on that hour-long call, it was like, of course it's going to be three guys sitting on a Zoom call talking about the way that we have to empower women more. But that in itself is exactly what needs to happen. It needs to happen. It needs to happen in conversations where it doesn't come across as though we're being pressured by anybody. There aren't a gaggle of women in front of us right now going like, you guys better talk about this and you better be on the support of this, right? It's genuine. It's coming from inside of like, we need to do this once again, because our mother is a matriarch. She's a rock star, man. So, and we know, and we have all these people. For anybody that's listening to this right now, everybody has a Rosie, even if it's somebody that they, once again, like maybe they just go to the bar and they don't know, but they have somebody in their lives that is that person. We have to champion those people.
I think that it's also important that people outside of the group that wants to be empowered has to help empower the group as well. And it's not about like, you were talking about how, and I was going to say this, but now I don't think that's necessarily true, because you were saying something about how it was your sisters were trying to be the purveyors of the words of men, and now here you are taking these pictures, so in a way you're trying to help women's voices. And I think that's true, but it's also like you were with your sisters, it seemed like that was the highest achievement they could do was to help these men achieve their goals. When that's not really what you're doing. You're now an equal to them. Right. And you're putting these women up on these pedestals and taking these great pictures. It's because they kind of need a little bit of a lift to get out there. But you're not demeaning men.
Right.
You're not saying that women are better than men, which is a weird kind of thing that now we have to kind of be like, we're your ally, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be like saying, well, our voices aren't important anymore. We're just saying your voices are equally as important as ours, and we can work together to make this a level playing field for everybody.
Right.
Which is honestly, as an artist, as a business maker, as a true capitalist, something you really want. You want the ground to be as even as possible so that the best people in the position can do the job and get the jobs. It's not like, well, because you're a man, you can do this job better. Right. It's no, you're the best person for this job because you have the right, like the brewmaster, like the brewmaster, because she can, because that's what she's passionate for. Traditionally, I would imagine a man would like beer more, but that's not necessarily the case. And you're proving it by saying that here is this woman, brewmaster, loves beer, and is actually really good at the job.
Right.
And you're just saying, hey, see, look there's not a job that you can't do as a woman, just like there's not a job that a man can't do. Like if a man likes to be a florist, likes flowers, he could be a florist. You know what I mean?
We know of a couple.
So that's the thing that I think that it's important to get this out there is because, we're trying to make everybody equal, and it just seems like historically, women have been said they can't do certain things. But so regardless if you're a man or a woman telling the story, well, traditionally it might make more sense for a woman to tell the story. It's not necessarily the only way it could get told.
Well, I would argue that they are telling the story.
Right.
And now we're amplifying it through our own. Mm-hmm. Right. So, and that's why it's really powerful. I hope that all made sense because it is really coming from a very genuine place. And that's why I think that, when we had that conversation, Chris, that first hour that we spoke, it was like, but actually, no, it does make sense because we do need to do this.
And I would differ only a little that like most of the women that are in these roles are way better than some of the guys that do these roles, right? I'm not saying that it's just that they excel. Like these women are excelling in their environment. And it wouldn't matter if she was a man or a woman. It doesn't matter. She's just doing the job she's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And well as she can. And sometimes that's better than guys. right?
Yeah.
Right.
That brewmaster, she's not the brewer. She's not the brewer. Just to clarify, she's not the brewer. She runs the business. Her husband does make the beer.
Oh,
Okay.
So maybe, just something to think about. But when she and her husband go to beer festivals, everybody talks to him.
Yeah.
Oh.
And
yeah.
she's the one running the business.
Right.
And she loves beer, and she wants to promote the business.
Yeah.
But she does that way better. He has no interest in being that part of this of their
Right.
business.
Yeah.
Right.
And so in their dynamic, she's the expert on running the business.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
He might be the brewmaster. She loves the beer, but people don't talk to her. Like, they don't even talk to her about business when she's at beer festivals. They're like,
Right.
oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about. It's 95% men, at least 95% men, I'm betting. So anyway, just to clarify that point, but I do think, like, these women, because of their voice and their travels to getting where they are, they have the challenges they have, and all the men that have really, I mean, they could all tell you stories about men discounting their voice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are better in many ways because of the path that they've chosen, the path that they've lived, right? They have a voice that men don't have. They have a thought process that men don't have. So I would challenge that kind of idea of it's equal, different, and better in a different way, right? Just men have a voice, and it can be really powerful, and they can be equal, but balance and build together in a different way. And that's what needs to happen. A mindset needs to change, that these women have a strong voice and we need to listen. So thanks for letting me clarify. I hope that
I think
makes sense.
I think that
we
were crossing the T's and dotting the I's.
Right.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So a very powerful, a very interesting world that could be had here, and now we're starting to transition into, like, how do we get this in front of more people? How can we start to inspire more men to come and look and find their modern Rosies in their lives and champion their voices? How can we start to change this cycle? And once again, like, Modern Rosie isn't going to be the end-all be-all. You're not going to end up changing the entire world in one fell swoop. But we need these projects, these companies, and these individual people to come together to start to turn the tide and roll the stone up the hill, to actually make the changes in the way that we just live life and how we are to each other. And so one of the things that we were talking about, one of my biggest complaint when I went onto your website was I would look at the pictures and I wanted to learn more about the person, and I'd click on the picture and then there was no information on them. There was no way for me to find these people and then in turn experience their story if I was interested enough. And we just keep on going back to the brewmaster because, like, I could physically go. I hope I don't end up having to go to the doctor who's over your right. Like, I mean, it would be great, but, like, I don't want to.
Right. No.
Because probably not a good thing's happening in my life if I do.
Oh.
But like, if I'm interested in, say, if I'm, say I'm whatever, not me per se, but say a young woman is coming to your site and seeing and being inspired by these people and then wants to have their own conversations. And I'm sure a lot of these women would be interested in having those conversations and being empowering that and having those discussions, and even suggesting, like, the power of a mentor is amazing. Yeah. So, like, so that was, like, the first thing.
Oh, that's interesting. You got a mentor program too, like you could for women. Yeah, right. Look at that. See, this is the
Modern Rosie mentor.
This is the magic of Storyworld Explorers. Something says we say something strange, and that's actually I think that's a great idea, and that could be something that you could expand on further down the line, especially, and that's why what we were talking about. Frank was saying the newsletter. I think on one of our conversations.
I was building up to that. So, like, essentially, right, like, how do we know, and what's the best way to kind of push out this message? I mean, you already have 9 going on 10 portraits done, correct?
Yep.
Right. And so we have all these amazing people and all these amazing stories that have their own social outlets and they have their own, either businesses or practices or something that they're putting stuff out. So how do we get more people to engage with this? And so one of the suggestions that we had when we were first talking, as we know with transmedia for loyal listeners, is that we're trying to create content, right? This initial content that's easy, that's not super labor intensive. It's not something that you dread doing every day, right? And you shouldn't do it every day. You should have it scheduled out a little bit more piecemeal. And so we were initially talking about doing like a once a month little newsletter of Modern Rosie that comes to your mailbox that highlights somebody. Once again, you have a reservoir of 9, which is always nice to have a reservoir of episodes, which is not something Jack and I have at the moment with Storyworld Explorers.
We're doing it right now.
Right, we're building.
And that's why we've devised seasons so that we can just get a bunch done, slowly let them out, and be like, that's the end of the season. You might not see us for a couple of months.
Right. But this idea that, like, I kind of want you to talk a little bit about like what the thought process was, because I know that you had been trying to write some stuff about each one and what these people meant to you. These aren't just random people that you're taking pictures of. These are people that you know. These are people that are recommended to you. That you have some personal connection with. So why don't go ahead and talk a little bit about like the challenges that you're kind of facing when it comes to writing that thing, and how then we can kind of, we've already kind of come to the conclusion off screen. Sorry, folks, but of like how we could potentially do this, and so that it was.
This is live.
Simple enough so that we don't feel we don't feel like it's a problem, or the challenge is too great, overwhelming. There you go. That's
it can be. So, I'm a photographer and I make a website that has pictures. That's simply what I do, right? Like there's nothing. When my first website had 15 pictures on it, and there was no extra tabs or anything. You just somebody would go in and you'd press on the one picture and it would go to the next one. I demanded that they have to go through all 15 before they could actually click around and see them again. I wanted to control the story. So like, I don't have video clicks. I don't think about making hyperlinks, right? My site is not built that way. So when you said to me, I want to like find out more about these people, it was like a no-brainer. I was like, I could have had a V8 moment where I was like, these should all have hyperlinks to each of these people's websites so they can be found. Somebody could email them. Like what all you're talking about was like a whole, and now I'm trying to find the innards of my website and figure out how to do that, right? Without changing it. Because when you do scroll over each image, it tells who they are.
Yeah. Right.
But it doesn't tell you how to get there. And it does need to be more interactive. Like, so you open that door, it was like, whoa. But for the last few years, I started writing pieces about each one. And it was really easy to write the first, 1,000 words. But then when somebody would say, it's got to be 600 and some words because, Instagram won't allow more than that. And then I was like, oh my gosh, no. And then somebody was helping me edit down. Marcel and his company helped me edit down. And it was great. So now I'm at 600 words. But then somebody's like, you need a 200-word version. I'm not a writer. I like writing. I'm a creative writer. I can do it. And I think the pieces that I've written are great. But it takes me a month or like if I dedicated a full month to it, I'd probably be done because I want it to be great. I'm a storyteller. I want it to be, it's really important to me and how it comes off. And I think they deserve that. I think they deserve a level of professionalism, grammar's right, like all of it. And while I can tell a creative story, I'm not a great writer. So now I'm at a point where I would really like to have a copywriter, write an original version, have them help edit it, and then us craft it together. That's really what I'd like it to be. And then that would be a good newsletter. I'm also liking the idea of doing a once every quarter podcast with one of them and really rolling that out with them. Right. There's a lot of things that this can grow into.
Right.
So like since you and I talked, the whole transmedia idea just blowing my mind and really making me think on so many more levels, because each of these Rosies have a massive network that love them. I mean, that are really loyal followers, right? This can really take off in so many directions. And I have to let go of some of that control of making it so perfect. That's really hard on me. I really hate stories, the whole like Instagram stories, and I really don't enjoy Facebook story, any of that, because it goes away.
Yeah.
And when I say something, I want it to kind of stick, and
Right.
I want to make sure what I'm saying sticks. So I'm really careful, but
Mm-hmm.
just got to be, there's a middle ground. I got to stop being so controlling. And this is opening my mind up to so many ways that this can grow. And I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need to shoot or take pictures of Rosie every quarter or every month. Like, I would love to do that. That'd be a great job. But just doing it whenever I can and getting more energy behind all of these stories that I already have built.
Yeah.
It'll grow. Like, I just know it now.
And it's also about, like, the transmedia thing is, like, do what you can do the best, and hopefully then you can start to find collaborators that can help you with the writing part, because there's a lot of power behind what you're trying to do. And so, like, and I think one of the suggestions we were going to make, because we always make the suggestion, but a podcast is definitely something, like, and especially if it's not super committal, and you already have at least 9 guests that you could do, and if you're doing it once a quarter, that's like 5 years of content. You know what I mean? So, like,
if you didn't do anything for the rest for 5 years,
right? You still have 5. And what we were also talking to you is, like, you have these first 9, you have these portraits, and now, this is and if you're gonna do the podcast, you could also do a documentary about these things, about these people. It could start as like a little movie, and then it could go into more of an episodic documentary that highlights each one of these individuals in their one whole episode. So it's like the legs on this. It's very tantalizing to get into, but like we said, you could get caught up in the weeds on the details when you have to start thinking of it more like. And we've used this analogy before, but this is more like a sandbox. You got to play.
Right.
The sandcastle isn't going to look good the first time we do it. The first podcast isn't going to be perfect. It's going to keep changing. It's going to get better. And you're going to be like, whoa, well, what if we did this? Your skills are going to get sharper in the areas that you're not an expert in. So, like, when you're talking about writing, you're like, I'm not an expert writer. Well, because you haven't done it enough. It's like, how long did it take you to become an expert in taking pictures? It takes a long time to develop those instincts, and as we keep doing it, you'll start to realize that you're going to be like, oh, at least I know some fundamentals about this particular craft, and I'm still going to be able to guide it to the way I want it. But it's ultimately, just like you said, you're not telling the story, they're telling the stories, you're just helping them tell it. That's exactly what you're going to be doing across all the mediums and all the different ideas that can spawn off of this project.
Right. It's I'm partnering with them to help push their story. I'm actually getting out of my, I think that one of the challenges that men face is to believe that a woman can be smarter and have a better idea than yours.
Sure.
And I'm not afraid of that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, and I'm sorry, I'm getting back into the philosophy of it, but I've got to get out of my own way and trust that it can grow, and just allow it to grow, and be humble about it, and let their stories drive it all, because it's super exciting to me to have what they do be out there. It's really important to me to have their message be the strength of everything. Right. So I may have gone on a tangent there, but I just think that idea, I think a lot of guys really have a hard time believing, or just dealing with the fact that maybe women are better moneymakers than them. Like, that's an idea that in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and here we are in 2023, there are a lot of guys that don't like it.
Yeah.
They want to be the guy that not only holds the door but picks up the bill.
Yeah.
Right. Like, there's a lot of problem with that mindset, and it's okay. Like, it's okay to say, I don't have, I can't do it right now, like, or whatever. Like, it's a little segue, but it's something that I wanted to make sure that was captured in some capacity. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, of course. And I think there are 3 things that I wanted to bring up from the previous before we do the segue, but we'll follow the segue for a little bit. It's one of those things that very, not ironically, but the similarities between our family and your family there's some cohesion there, because you're the photographer, our father was a photographer, but our mother made all the money, and whenever they'd go on vacation, we go on vacation. For the most part, they used Dad's money because we didn't need it. Like Mom was,
the provider.
She was the provider. She's still the
She still is the provider.
The juggernaut. My backup ammunition. I call her my backup guns. And honestly, what I'm noticing a lot now, too, is that how I describe my mother to people scares them of her. And I'm like, she is the nicest person. Like, why are you assuming she's going to come in here and just flamethrower things?
Yeah,
and I realize that when I talk about her, I build her up so high.
She becomes more like Rambo than than our mom.
Rambo.
And, but that's the thing, too, because if we were to describe our father like that, I don't think anybody would be scared of him. Because
maybe
because if you think about it, like if a man is like, oh yeah, no, he knows all the finances, he makes all the money, he makes all the financial decisions, he's in there, and, you'd be like, oh, like a normal dad, But if we were to talk about our dad who just recently passed away, but that's neither here nor there. That's part of the reason why we took a hiatus from the podcast.
Correct.
But the way we talked about, it's like, oh yeah, my dad likes. Like I remember when I was in grammar school, one of my friends said, "Oh, my dad wakes me up and he takes me to school right before, before we get to, and then he goes to work, and then my mom makes me my lunch." And I was like, "What kind of weird ass family are you a part of?" I was like, "I have to wake my dad up to take me to school, and my dad makes me my lunch. My mom works. Like, what kind of weird lunacy world are you living in where whatever you said was normal?" Right. And I didn't realize until I was a sophomore in high school that I was a part of the weird family that had the mom work and the dad stay at home. Right. So that's another thing where it's not like it didn't work. It's not like it wasn't a functional family.
Working. Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like my mom loves me. My dad cared for me. Just because my dad didn't provide for the family in the traditional way does not mean he wasn't there. The same way, it's not like I have some attachment issue because my mom was working all the time. So it's one of those things where it's like, coming from you, it's like a lot of men don't understand that. But then, a lot of men probably also haven't experienced what our family dynamic was. Right. Because I remember telling to people today, it's still strange to them. It's like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I have 3 boys and my wife is the main breadwinner, and I am creative, and I sometimes have great jobs that allow us to go to Puerto Rico. Like we did that once. And, right. So we have very similar things. Right. And I remember when my kids were young, I was changing diapers all the time. And there were guys that I knew that never changed diapers. Yeah. I have a friend who's my age that he had 4 children and he was never in the room when the babies were born. Yeah. Because that was his dad's way, that his dad said, "Oh, you don't need to be in there. Stay outside and be prepared to hand over the cigar." Right. Right. And by the 4th one, his wife was like, "No, I don't want you in this room. Like, no, you're not. I've done this 3 times already. I know what I'm doing." Right. But I was like, there was no way, and I'm not putting him down. It was just the way he and his wife worked. Right. Yeah. But I remember saying to many friends that more men today are changing diapers than ever before in the history of the world. And this was like 2000, 2000, 2001, 2003, when my 3rd one was born. I'm like, yeah, I could do that with one hand and, be doing something else on the other, in my other, I could be like, there's so many things that I've learned how to do. And this was just our dynamic and So anyway, there's one other thing that's really interesting about my portraits and that's really important to me. Like in 2019, I did a portrait of a forensic doctor. Forensic psychologist. She testified for judges or for lawyers on cases, right? Yeah. And her PR person was a woman in her, I think, 50s, and told her that when I told her to stand and cross her arms like this, for the portrait. And neither of these two up here have that. But she stood like this, and she's like, "My PR person said I should never do that." And I said, "What are you talking about?" Because I do it all the time with women. And she goes, "Yeah, my PR person said that we should never do that because you look too intimidating as a woman."
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, you can be strong and welcoming and powerful as a woman. All of that can be true, right? Yeah, that meant and she ended up choosing only the portraits with her arms crossed. It was so funny. She was like, and she was smiling. You can be laughing. Like all of that can be true with
right.
it was such a mentality shift. I'm like, your PR person's nuts. Like I was so, I said it to her right away. I'm like, you're out. She's, I didn't say she's whack, but I might have. So you might, but I was like, no, we're going to do it. And then she chose both of those. And but that's just the mentality of a world before, you know, of yesteryear. I want to get rid of that. Like you can be powerful and welcoming. All of that can be true in a portrait.
Yeah, right.
Right. And
exactly.
Right.
So thank you for that. That's great.
Yeah.
I just I love this conversation because I could probably talk. Like you said, we're going to have to cut it off somehow. Like,
Right. So there were 3 points that I wanted to bring up that you kind of touched on at random a little bit earlier on that I think are really, really important from a business standpoint, because once again, whenever we're talking about, people don't like to talk about this stuff, and it's kind of ironic because I think that even in the work that I do for See Chicago Dance, they're starting to realize that you have to have a little bit of a capitalistic instinct in order to help people. Like, you know, like that's the system, you got to work within the system. And then also the elevation of these women, and then like Jack, like, you know, like this whole mentoring thing, which might be way far down the line, right? That might be when Michelle Obama starts to come up and wants to be a part of this, right? But like,
he got really excited.
No, I know. Well, we had mentioned Michelle Obama before in one of our conversations.
I didn't have.
He's like, if Michelle Obama wanted to do it, I would be like, yes.
The holy lights came on.
But you know, like that might be a little bit further down the line. But there are 3 things. So number one, from a business perspective for these individuals that you're taking pictures for, right? We talked about how they had their champions. And I know that you listened to the one podcast episode we did with Jeff Gomez where he was talking about these apostles, right? They have their apostles. They have people that talk about them unprompted, unpaid, and are just nuts about them. They're just like, you have to go and blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, you know, like whatever. Like you have an ankle issue, you have to go talk to this doctor. She's a modern Rosie, you know, and not necessarily that's what it is.
And I just had a weird idea. I don't mean to cut you off, Frank.
But you did.
But I'm thinking about the mentor thing. Like how we just were talking about how most men have a hard time understanding that a woman can have a strong voice.
Oh, maybe it's only
What if it is, and not exclusively, but there could be a side where it's like women mentors for young men.
For young men, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that here all of a sudden, now they know that this is a voice that is, first of all, in charge, is an expert, and you are going to be taking either criticism, you're going to be taking advice from them, you're going to be learning from them, and you don't have to be intimidated when you're ever in this position, when you have a woman boss. Or it's like, well, I'm not going to listen to her because it's a woman, you know? That sounds like such an old man.
Well, you did an old man voice, too.
But I think that is like, that sounds a little like counterintuitive, but just based on what we were talking about, it seems like that's a very strong and necessary thing that needs to happen.
Of course.
Because if you think about it, like a woman learning from a woman mentor, that's powerful. Right. But a man learning from, like for me with screenwriting, my mentor or my first mentor was a woman, and I had no problem taking advice from her, taking anything she was saying because I knew she was smart and she was in charge and she knew her craft very well. But you know what? That's because of my experience with a strong, powerful woman in my own family. Okay. And you know, maybe if things had worked out a little differently, I would be like, what does this woman know about screenwriting? It's creative. It's for men, you know?
Right. Ridiculous. It's Don Draper. It's back to Mad Men.
Right.
We're moving so far past that, and it's so nice. Like it's like we've come a long way, and let me just say this, Frank, because I'm thinking it. Yeah. Is that I think that the women of America are the strongest women in the world. Like if you just purely watch soccer. And women's basketball. There's nobody even close. I'm not saying that Rosie did that, but what I'm saying is that like my kids all played soccer with girls up until 8th grade, on the field together. Yeah, and these women are not afraid to go into college playing against any women. Like these girls that they played with. That kind of mentality. My boys were awesome with those girls. Like those girls. My son got tackled by a girl as hard as he's ever been tackled on the football field. I'm like, he still is like, wow, that was a hit, right? But I think women in America are the strongest women in the world, and I just say that, and I think that Rosie has a piece of that, which is why I get really excited about this. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that point was made.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Of course. And so essentially what I was saying is very much in line with all this stuff, but to be able to elevate people, like when we're talking about marketing for anybody, right, the best thing that you can get is a recommendation from a friend, right? That makes a decision so much easier. And so what this platform is, these pictures, an eventual newsletter, a bio, something that you could subscribe to and get once a month and be like, you know what? I'm in the need of X, Y, or Z. Or like I could really use to reach out to this person because they're an expert in this particular field. And that helps elevate the their own marketability and their own prestige, if you will. And it's another outlet, and there's no shortage of outlets, right? And when we were talking about social media, Chris, earlier, and how, you know, like people, you post something up and it gets like 25 likes, and you're like, but I posted up a picture of a baby cat and I got like 3,000 likes. Like what? Like nobody cares about this. And it's not necessarily that nobody cares. It's just, it's not reaching the people that do. And I think that when in a newsletter, you might get, like, say you have 1,000 subscribers, and a Modern Rosie newsletter gets 25 clicks on a link that goes to that person's website, is a huge turn. That's a huge return rate on that. And it's incredibly impactful for that Rosie, because then that's 25 people that otherwise they may not have been attached to. And those 25 people, if you get one of those people to become a new apostle for that person, somebody that advocates for them, falls in love with what they do, wants to help them in any which way that they can, boom, shakalaka, lock, stock, and barrel. Yep. We got something, you know, and that's huge for them. So there's that side of it. On the other side, with this, I had 3 and I totally lost them. But that was my one that I was like, you know what, like, it's important to bring up because of how important it can be. It's not just, it's that's why this project is so amazing. It's not just about the social impact. It's not just about elevating the careers. It's not just trying to change a system that's been in place forever. It has all these different elements, and they can help out in all these different ways. And it doesn't make a difference whether, and I got one of the points back, I'm going to go right into it now, with this transmedia idea of perfection and being afraid to put stuff out there because we're not sure if it's perfect or it's not right. And I know that you're working through this. This is just kind of in a general type of thing. We don't necessarily know that this newsletter is going to be a hit.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We don't. We don't know if anybody is going to listen to this podcast. We don't know if the podcast blows up, what the next iteration of that could be. It could be more of like a talk show type thing. It could be its own little segment on WGN News, where you're sitting there and as like a guest host anchor once a month, or on Chicago Tonight, you could be talking about these Modern Rosie. We don't know what that next step is. That's why transmedia as a sandbox is so much fun to play in, because you could literally build anything. Each one of these individual women have their own stories that could potentially be their own story worlds, but let's not go down that route because we'll just lose our minds. But you have, like, you don't know what it is. And the only way we can start to experiment and know what we actually have is when we start to put that stuff out there. And the last point is the consistency of that is not to get too bogged down to trying, and you're not doing this. And trust me, Jack and I have made this mistake. We are not perfect transmedia people by any means. When we did the podcast at first, we had a new episode every single week. It literally killed us. We made absolutely no money on it. And it was terrible. But now,
because we were constantly trying to struggle for guests to get on, and
you
we
get
weren't
bad
really
guests,
we weren't vetting them, and they were just talking, and we're like, well, this is a bummer of an episode.
So having a little bit of content that you know how to do really well, or that you're working really hard on, and then distributing that when you have it. I mean, trying to do it on a schedule just so people kind of like, hey, it's the end of the month. There's usually a Modern Rosie newsletter coming out. That helps the anticipation. But just allowing yourself to really dive into a project and build that audience and know that it's going to take a while. It's not going to be, it could be instantaneous. I'm not going to say it can't be, but there's a good chance that the beginning of it's going to be a slog until you start to develop your own apostles that are like, this Chris Guillen guy, this guy's doing something that nobody else is. And that we need to pay attention to this. And I'm going to start telling my friends about Modern Rosie, get them to subscribe to it because of the importance of it.
I'm thinking because we had some the nonprofit Fathering Together.
Yeah.
On that could be a good because
we like Fathering Together on this podcast.
Yeah,
we recommend them a lot.
But I'm thinking that because Fathering Together is about fathers taking roles in the father, actually
specifically with their daughters.
With their daughters,
that's the important.
That could be a good way. I mean, maybe these fathers are going to be raising modern Rosies.
Oh.
That's right. No, they are. They don't even know it.
Right.
Yeah,
they're not even thinking that, right?
Right, exactly. But I think, and it's also kind of a role reversal because it's about, like what you're saying, the fathers that have to change the diapers, know all the schedule, get back, actually be a part of the raising process was where, it's traditionally, the man just has to go hunt and come back and then the children
knock the woman
are
over the head with a club and say, "Okay, you love me," and let's
right. So I think
I'm do this again tomorrow.
Yeah, right. I think that's a good.
That would be an interesting introduction,
right?
Or a potential partnership collaboration of some sort. Well, we can introduce you to Brian Anderson. That's not a problem.
That'd be great.
So this has been a great conversation. We are at 57 minutes, if you can believe it, of talking about this. I think that we've dove into a lot of the importance of this. I love this idea. Transmedia is often just categorized as entertainment, and it doesn't have to be, right? Even if it has entertainment aspects to it, like a podcast, which you would categorize as entertainment, it can also still have such a social impact core to it, right? And that's what this really does. I mean, we're not sitting here trying to, you could do graphic novel. You could do anything. It's what's so fun about it, right? I was like, you can't do graphic novel. I'm like, yes, you can. The one over your right shoulder is like in a superhero pose. It could literally be a graphic novel.
Well,
actually, both of them are
in superhero
They
poses.
both are. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
They both are. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So they could do graphic novels of them. But anyways, this has a social core to it. It has a social impact. It is it's addressing a problem that all of us here and many, many, many people know about. And is trying to solve it without boring lectures about why we should be doing something, but inviting people in through different types of avenues and getting them excited and learning and growing without even really knowing it. And that's the real impact.
It's also and it's not necessarily blaming someone for the problem either. It's about empowering people and helping others be empowered, which is why I really think that the whole I don't even know if there's anything out there like that, women mentors for young boys, because that sounds like such a interesting idea to at least get them, because that's how you get someone, because that's just what it is. If this is my mentor, she's a fucking rock star in her field, and I want to learn from this person, then all of a sudden you stop all of this macho chauvinistic men Well,
what really happens here too is that it's through conversation that a lot of those boogeyman type of things, those stereotypes disappear, and you see this a lot with if you talk to people that are particularly racist against certain races or whatever. As soon as they sit down and talk to these guys, they're like, "Oh, you watched that show too?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "Yeah, I fucking love that show," And then they go like, "Oh, we're not so different, are we?" But if they never have those interactions, then the stereotypes get reinforced over and over and over again.
And the rift gets very, very large until it's
correct. Right, and then
something.
They dehumanize.
It's definitely a learned thing that happens. It's
correct.
not
I'm
natural
interested
thing.
I'm really interested to hear male. Changing that dynamic, changing the way that it's thought about women, is a long process. It doesn't happen overnight. And and I think I said this to you, Frank, when we talked originally, that somebody's going to label me as a feminist. And I'm like, I'm just actually, of course I love women, and I love to help build women up, right? I don't think that should be a feminist mindset. That doesn't have, that should just be the way we are.
Right.
It doesn't, right. We should all be building up women, because women have throughout history of mankind, all they've ever done is help build men up.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right.
Why is it such a hard idea for us to, help build women up? And why would you want to label that? Like, there's nothing, nothing. It's because feminism can sound like an ugly word. And I said that to you. There's no word the opposite way towards men.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
That's vilified or looked at as they're the enemy.
Right. Or like
and
masculinism.
Right.
Just doesn't work.
There isn't that word.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is combat the idea that, or just the thought process. Don't label me as something like that, because this is just what we should be doing. Like we should be helping people that are great partners build up this world. That's just what it should be.
Right.
So help build young Rosies. Let them have their own autonomy and their own level ground. There's nothing wrong with that idea. So,
great.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's a great wrap on the entire conversation. Chris, thanks so much for jumping on with us. I say this at the end of every podcast. If you whatever you need from us resource-wise, if we can help you out, make an introduction, talk about different types of content, how to get that stuff done. If you're starting your podcast, I'm like, I don't even know what kind of equipment I need, whatever. Feel free to reach out to us. We will help you make this into a reality. And then also, for being on the podcast, we require you to do a spot, a portrait of our mother for Modern Rosie, who is a fantastic woman.
And we also have another person out in LA that would be a good Modern Rosie
that's true too, Kathy King.
She just became the president of some international real estate development club.
Well, you can see how easy this can grow. Like,
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, intrepid explorers. If you want to explore more story worlds, Frank?
I think they're over on this side here. We have a lot of great content from season 1 of Storyworld Explorers for you to explore. If you want to learn more about transmedia and how to build your own story world, we have a great episode for that. And you'll find that one at the very top. And then another story world that we think kind of matches what this story world was about at the bottom. Thank you so much for watching all the way through to get to the end of this video. We'll catch you next time.